Welcome to the Vandy Sports Podcast. I'm your host, Chris Lee. Our guest today, Seabass of WNWS in Jackson, Tennessee. We thank our presenting sponsor, Wellspire, Nashville's Learning and Development Center. Wellspire offers personal and professional development opportunities in a beautiful facility in the Gulch neighborhood. Stop by for an event with world-renowned speakers or host an off-site event that will wow your team or your clients. Today's news presented by Sutherland & Belk, a Nashville-based injury law firm. Sutherland & Belk is committed to fighting for those who've been injured in car, motorcycle, and truck accidents. Check them out at sbinjurylaw.com. Well, now is the time where you were seeing former Commodores sign with pro teams. Earlier in the week, it was Ethan Paul with the Pirates. Now it is Philip Clark with the Blue Jays. He has signed for around $500,000. Joe Gabalo has also signed with the Rays. Pat DeMarco is supposed to sign with the Yankees. Now we wait on Jackson Gillis, Zach King, Ty Duvall in terms of players with some eligibility left, and not to mention several drafted incoming freshmen, the biggest question of those being Blaine McIntosh. Signing deadline is July 12th at 4 Central. In football news, the Sporting News has picked tight end Jared Pinkney as its preseason first-team All-American tight end for the 2019 season. Today's guest line, presented by Boll & Branch, started by Vanderbilt graduate Scott and Missy Tannen. I've slept on those sheets for years. They're amazing. Had more appreciation for them after missing out on them for a week and a half while I was on the road, and just got a great reminder when I came home of how much I like them. They are fair trade certified. That means they've been made under safe conditions by men and women who are treated and paid fairly. Try them for a month. You can return them for free, but you're not going to want to. If you have the sheets, get the mattress. That was voted best mattress of 2018. Go to bollandbranch.com. That's spelled B-O-L-L. Enter the promo code Vandy. Get $50 off your first set of sheets. Seabass joins us now. He is from WNWS in Jackson, Tennessee, where he has a daily radio show. He's been a longtime guest of our podcast. My friend, thanks for joining us. I regret that we couldn't do this the last couple of weeks, and I know people missed the episode that you and I do together, not the least of which is me. But it is good to have you back, my friend. Hope you are well.
Missed it, don't regret it. Because the reason we didn't do it because we were playing in the World Series and we won it. So I don't regret it a bit. But I did miss you. And I miss doing the remote. Or not the remote, but the podcast. So I'm glad we're back doing it once again, son. And you know what I told you this morning. We'll recap a little baseball, but you know where my eyes are firmly fixed right now, son.
You're more excited about football starting than you were at the end of the College World Series. Is that safe to say?
It is, but I mean, it doesn't mean I don't love our boys. I do. I was extremely excited. I was walking around strutting when we won our second national championship. I'm just more of a football guy, what I do. So, you know, but it's not a knock, and I want to celebrate it today on this podcast. I just, you know, I mean, there's no way around football being my first love.
You and I have talked a little bit, though. Jackson is neither a hotbed of interest for Vanderbilt, nor does a hotbed of interest for college baseball. But I think when you and I talked, you said there was massive interest in Vanderbilt in the College World Series out your way, which to me is really telling. And I think that is a great sign for college baseball and for Vanderbilt.
By the way, hey, man, congratulations on the Doors. How awesome. How great are they? Great team. I mean, look, yes, Jackson is a small sample size, but just like the ratings for baseball on ESPN this year, this Michigan Vanderbilt was the highest rated baseball game on ESPN this year. Is that right? Is that what I read?
Yeah, that's correct, which is hard to believe. And I know single game baseball is a little different because there's single games and there's so many games. I think that's one reason that some of the people that are down on college baseball are a little disingenuous, because when you're comparing one game is a smaller slice of the pie than it is for, say, basketball and football and those sorts of things. But yeah, I believe it was, and that was what I was shocked at. That was the highest rated game of all the games ESPN has shown this year. That I'm sure includes Yankees, Red Sox, things like that. That to me was remarkable.
Yeah, Sunday night baseball every week, man. Yeah, that's a very, very big deal, you know. And I mean, I was glued to it. I had people calling in, had a Michigan fan trying to talk a little smack, made $5 on an ill-gotten wager on my friend's part, on betting on the doors. So, yeah, man, loved it. Couldn't have been more excited for Coach Corbin and his team. You know, remember I asked you a couple of weeks ago if this team goes and this season does not end with a national championship game with title, would this be a failure? And I didn't answer it myself. I just let you answer. And now that I look back on it and I think about it, it absolutely would have been. It would have. I don't. Maybe failure's a little bit strong. But Chris, this team was clearly the number one team in the country all year long. The things that this team was able to accomplish, I mean, you look where they're ranked in a billion different stats nationally, not just in the Southeastern Conference. And, I mean, there's just no way around it. I mean, don't get me wrong, there's teams who could beat them. That's the nature of college baseball. But the fact of the matter is this is clearly the number one team in America, and there's no doubt. And, you know, the best part about it is, to me, and you might debate me on this, though I would venture to guess you're much more analytical than I am. This is by far the hardest championship to win, to me, in North American sports, Chris. And here's why. Because you tell me another sport, Chris, be it college basketball, football, NFL, anything, in which you go into a game, probably in most cases a deciding game, and you have to put people who are not your best players out there, even if there's no injury. Now, when I say that, I mean Mason Hickman was awesome. Loved what he did. But if you're playing, let's say you're Duke basketball, you know, and if you don't have any injuries, you're getting the same starting five that got you to that final championship game. You're going to play those same players all the time. In baseball, because of the road that you have to take, I mean, you have to go in there sometimes, you know, with your third, fourth, fifth best pitcher in a deciding game to win a national championship. You tell me another sport that does that.
Oh, yeah, you make a great point there. I've never thought about it like that. I don't know that I would go as far as say it's the hardest to win, but I think there are some things that support your argument and some things that don't. The things that don't, I'll start with those first, is I think sometimes you can just get lucky, although you could say that, I guess, about anything. You know, you can say that in the NCAA tournament, like the year that Virginia was number 1 2 years ago in the basketball tournament and got knocked off by 16. Well, the second round opponent just got a markedly easier schedule. That does happen. And I think in baseball, too, sometimes you can get, you know, somebody gets upset like UCLA did. And so what you get, like, and Vanderbilt got a little bit of that in the Super Regional. I mean, let's face it, Duke gave Vanderbilt quite a battle, but you would rather had Duke than especially Texas A&M and probably West Virginia as well. So that's where I disagree with you a little bit, is that I think that there's some randomness to baseball that is present more than other sports that lends itself to those things. On the other hand, I don't know that Vanderbilt got a ton of breaks. Yes, it got the break with Duke, but Duke was pretty good when it got here, and it had two pretty good pitchers, and it busted that series open in that deciding Game 3. I guess you could say that it got the break with Michigan coming out of that side of the bracket. I don't really know that, now that we've seen Michigan, that was much of a break. I just think that Michigan's RPI was held down by a pretty weak conference schedule, and just because you don't play teams – say conference schedule, non-conference too, but just because you don't play strong teams does not mean that you aren't a strong team. The RPI is heavily influenced by that schedule component, and that's where Michigan took a hit. So even with Michigan being a 3 seed in a regional, you look at what it had, and Henry and Kaufman and Criswell, and that lineup was just so good, 1 to 9, and very talented, very athletic. I think that Michigan was – I don't know that Michigan – catching the Wolverines on that side in the championship series was a break, even with the seeding. But you look at the Omaha bracket. You look at the two teams you probably didn't want to face were Mississippi State and Louisville, and it got State once and Louisville twice. It didn't catch a break in there where it got Auburn or something like that. So I think we could argue that maybe the 3 best teams in college baseball were Vanderbilt, Louisville, and Mississippi State. That's what I would argue. Vanderbilt beat two of those teams to get to where it was in the title series. And to go back further, I said for a while, I think that sometimes winning the SEC tournament is tougher than winning in Omaha. And again, that's based on matchups. And Vanderbilt won that too, and not to mention the regular season. So any way you slice it, they were, like you said, they were the best.
Well, but see, now here's the thing. Everything you said was true. And, of course, let's not forget that Vanderbilt in the last month of college baseball against Louisville and Mississippi State went 5-0, by the way. But let's also remember something else. Remember something that I said. Now, we can talk about upsets in college basketball and all these things, but in this case, even if they got upset, they would have done it with their best foot forward. And when it comes to college baseball, you can't do that because of pitch counts.
Right,
you have to have the depth that if it comes down to your fourth or fifth starter, that you can win. Even if that team finds it's perfectly set up and they're throwing their two, you have to be able to beat them with good baseball players, but clearly not the guys who are your one or your two, and still win it. And that is why it is harder to win than any other sport. I mean, Chris, look, I got to tell you something. Think about it. Coastal Carolina won the national championship. What was that? 3 years ago, I think, 2 or 3 years ago.
Correct. Yes, 3.
It is so freaking difficult to do. Tough enough to win any championship. But in every other sport that I can think of, including softball, because you keep running those star pitchers out there over and over again. You cannot do that in baseball. Once Kumar Rocker gave up that ball in game number 2, he was done for the series. Period.
No, I generally agree. The only place that I would depart a little bit is just because there is randomness in baseball and a ground ball getting through for a couple of runs or home run just clearing the fence or not. And there are big swings there, and that's why you have more upsets sometimes in baseball than you do in other sports because there is probably more luck. Like in football, if you're just better, you're going to line up. If you're significantly better than the other team, you're going to line up and beat them 9 times out of 10. That does not happen in baseball. I generally agree with your only point. That's just the only part where the argument falls apart a little bit. But I'm not invalidating what you were saying because I think that is true as well.
But see, think about what I'm saying, Chris. That what you just said, that is what makes it so much harder because you're right. Look, if Clemson is playing Southern Miss, Clemson's going to beat Southern Miss not 9 times out of 10, 10 times out of 10. Every time they're beating them. Quarterback go out, still going to beat them. But that Coastal Carolina versus Vanderbilt matchup could go 9 out of 10, could go 6 out of 10 because of exactly what you're saying. The ball through the legs, all these little things that make it, to me, that much more difficult.
No, you're right, and you raised some good points that we've never discussed before. Let me ask you this. What was your favorite part of the season? Maybe a favorite moment or something that happened that you enjoyed the most?
Let's see. I would have to say, if it was one particular game, I would have to say the no-hitter by Kumar Rocker.
Yeah.
19 strikeouts, 19 swing and misses. That would be my favorite.
I think the 2 defining moments of this year, and I wrote an article that included about a dozen, but now that it's a week in our rearview mirror, I think the 2 that were sort of signature moments for them would be the Rocker no-hitter, the Luke Smith game with Louisville, and really as a third, probably the comeback in Hoover to beat Ole Miss for the championship that Sunday. Those were just 3 moments that I think 20 years from now we will still be talking about.
Yeah, the only thing about the Ole Miss, and the Ole Miss thing was awesome. It was just at the time during that game, during that tournament, really, my mindset was still kind of, I don't want to tax people. We got a long road ahead of us. I don't want to tax people. I really wasn't all that interested in going too far in Hoover. Obviously, ended up not being an issue and not hurting us. But it kind of kept me from getting the in-the-moment joy because I was a little worried about it.
No, I get that. And I think a lot of people were, but it seems to me like more teams are playing to win it in Hoover now.
That's right. Has to be.
And I'll tell you another thing. I'm really glad that happens because I've never really bought the notion that you can peak too soon. Here's what I mean. This you should just lose a couple games now for the sake of losing. As if somehow through some superstition that makes you more likely to win it later. No, I just think you play to win every day. I don't think that one game, unless you wear yourself out, has much to do with the next. I think the more you win, the more it proves how good you are. And I like to see competition. I'm glad that event now has a little more meaning because it's just one more thing that they can put on the resume to say, oh, by the way, in case you're wondering if the national title was a fluke, because sometimes those things are, we have that too if you're Vanderbilt.
Okay, so let's ask and answer the question. I know people have been wondering, and they've been asking a little bit around, is this the best Vanderbilt baseball team ever, and is this the best college baseball team ever?
Oh, to the one on Vanderbilt, yes. And I've even spent a lot of time diving into past stats and lineups. First of all, this lineup undoubtedly was the best. This was not the deepest and most polished pitching staff, but the way that it lined up in a championship series where you could throw Hickman and you could throw Rocker and you got to win 2 out of 3. Those guys were so dominant that they could do that. And those guys could go deep in games. And then you had Tyler Brown who could go over 2-3 innings. And then you could get some good relief out of a Jake Eater or somebody like that in between. The lineup is there every game. The pitching, as you said, varies. I think in the way that it all pieced together, this bore out in the results, I do think it was their best team ever. I think you can end that debate because before it was like, well, do you pick the 2014 team because it did win it all and it got better? Or do you pick the 2013 team because it was 26-3 in the league? Or do you pick the 2011 team because it was so consistent? Or even the 2007 team, although I think that getting eliminated in the Nashville Regional, it didn't invalidate that team's accomplishment, but it diminished the argument there. At least those other teams got to Omaha, got to a super regional. But to me, this one settles it. In terms of all time, I'm not the guy to answer that. I know that the Oregon State team that went 56-6 or whatever it was, boy, that's pretty hard to beat. I'll put it this way. I think I would safely say, and I think you kind of divide this into 2 arguments. You could say best teams that won a title because there were a lot of great ones that didn't. I think if you just take the teams that won the title, I think this one's easily got to be a top 20% team of those. I don't know whether it was the best ever. And again, I'd have to really look into some of that, but I think it was definitely one of the all-time greats across college baseball. Wherever you settle in that hierarchy, I don't know, but it's there.
I got one more question, baseball-wise. What were your thoughts? What was going through your mind as you were talking about the best moments of the season? The forecast spelled doom through the first 3 batters of game number 3 in Omaha. 3 batters, 3 hits, it's 1-0, no outs with runners on first and second. And you just knew, look, we need 6 innings out of Mason Hickman. We can't go to the pen here. We just can't do this. So in that situation right there, and then to see Mason come back, dude, strike out the freaking side, and then, dive into that game and got comfortable and just pitched his tail off the rest of the way. Look, it's going to be hard to top that moment with Kumar Rocker. That was just so cool. But how gutsy was that by Mason?
It's funny. We were driving back from Omaha, and we got stuck in traffic in Nashville on the way to Franklin when the game started. So I was listening to that first inning in a traffic jam in Nashville on the interstate. And so all I had to go by was Joe Fisher's voice, and you could tell he was concerned. He said they're hitting line drives, and when guys are hitting line drives, that's bad. But you could also hear in his voice when he came back and struck out the side, and I believe he did that. I believe he struck out those 3 guys on 11 pitches, which is very efficient. When he did it that way and followed up the next inning, at that point I'm like, okay, they just need to get some offense, and they have this thing because that's Mason Hickman pitching like Mason Hickman. And when Mason Hickman pitches like Mason Hickman, they just don't lose.
Yeah. I mean, I was just so I was doing the show at the time, and I'm watching the game, and it's very hard. I'm not going to say I'm a huge cursor, but I'll do from time to time. And it was hard for me to do the show live and not say what I wanted to say. I was man, everything on the line here. What in the world? But just such a huge performance, such a clutch performance on his part, man. And then, as you mentioned, we just need some run support. Now, you say just get some run support. We didn't have any. I mean, I'm trying to remember now. Help me out, because I could be wrong about this. I may be forgetting about one game. But did they have more than 5 runs in the game coming into that third game in the whole time they were in Omaha?
They got 3 against Louisville. They got 6 against Mississippi State, 5 in one inning, 3 against Louisville, then 4 against Michigan, then 4 again in a 4-1 win, and then 8. So, yeah, that was not their best week of offense.
No, and so, all we got to do is get the lineup going. Well, they hadn't really been going in Omaha for if everything's relative for them, they hadn't been doing much. But man, when they had to have it, they found a way to get it done, and just couldn't be happier for those guys. And it's it's funny because you go to social media, and I couldn't help notice how much play we were getting, not just by our fan base, but by everybody. And it was either, God, this team is great, or some salty rascal talking about 11.7. You know what I mean? So, I don't know, man. I'd have to say overall, I probably watched maybe 25 games this year overall because with my ESPN app. So I got a chance to see this team more so than some of the others in the past. But this was probably the most fun I've had watching this team this season that I've ever had.
I have 2 thoughts off some things that you just said, and then we'll get into the mailbag because I know you've got to go. I get internal numbers of how much our content is read and how long it is read, and I was really surprised at how much audience there was for baseball late in the year. Usually football recruiting and maybe basketball trump everything. I think our baseball numbers for some stuff at the very end were higher than anything, which really surprised me. Number 2, I've always wanted college baseball to get more popular because I really appreciate the game. You know me, I'm a baseball guy at heart. Major League Baseball is my favorite sport on the pro level and so on. And that's been that way for me since I was 7 or 8. And so I've kind of wanted people to be able to experience college baseball because I just think it's a great game. And I'm excited. I was excited that Michigan got to make it and a different part of the country got to see what kind of game it is. But the one thing that I don't like about it, I think when it was a smaller game, when I first got into it, one of the things that attracted me to it was it wasn't like football and basketball where fans were nasty to each other and people wished the worst for each other. It was more of a thing where I think the SEC baseball fans within conference, maybe except for Tennessee, Vandy, and Alabama, Auburn, and the bitter rivalries, generally fans rooted for each other. And I don't sense that now. I sense a lot of jealousy and pettiness, especially coming out of one particular state. And I hate that is kind of crept in because to me, that's one of the things that I really loved about college baseball is that it didn't come with all that other garbage and nonsense that some of the other sports do. Like you will even see people in town who were Tennessee fans that will root hard for Vanderbilt just because. And that's the thing that I fear the game may be losing some.
Well, I mean, and I understand that, but the other side of that coin, another way of looking at it is that just means that it matters now.
And that's true. Yeah.
I mean, nobody's going to talk smack if, the golf team, falls in the national championship. Nobody's going to get on the message boards and start talking smack about that for another team. I got to say, and I even said this on my show. I said, look, because honestly, there's a lot of Tennessee fans that were rooting for us to win that game. And I even told them, I said, listen, I said, this is very interesting. I said, because I'm going to be honest with you. There's nothing that I would root for you in. Call me what you want, call me Betty, But, and I wasn't throwing shots at him. I was just being truthful. I said, there's no chance whoever you were playing is who I would root for, no matter what. But I got to say, a lot of these fan bases of other teams in the conference, including Tennessee, were pulling for Vanderbilt to win that baseball series. And that kind of blew me away because I can't do that. I can't do it, Chris. I mean, if the effect on my part, if I'm a bad fan, I'm a bad person, and they're just better than me, then so be it. But that's not where I'm at.
Let's go to the mailbag, which is sponsored by Vanderbilt fan and independent insurance agent Josh Minton of Brentwood. If you're in the market for auto, motorcycle, renters, or landlord insurance, or even commercial or life insurance, you can call Josh at 615-933-1979. Email him at josh@hqinsurance.com. Follow him on Facebook at facebook.com/JD Minton. He's my insurance agent, and I hope you will make him yours as well. He's a great guy, does a tremendous job, and a big Vandy fan, as I said, to boot. Okay, Dusty Orleans says, assuming he is an immortal, who would you see as the odds-on favor to replace Tim Corbin once he eventually retires or whenever he eventually retires? Much has been discussed about Eric Bakich being a possibility, but I'm curious if you think he would go with one on his own image or one who could put his own unique but similar stamp on the program.
Look, maybe somebody else has a different answer, but, I mean, you just mentioned the answer to me. I'm the one who's been there, who's studied under Coach Corbin, who, has already had tremendous success. I can't think of anybody better than that. And, you talk about being in somebody's shadow and all this other stuff. I get that, I suppose. But, there's a reason, like when major college basketball programs or major football programs come open, people flock to it. Everybody wants it. They don't sit back and say, well, this guy was there and I don't want to have to, I don't think that would be the case. And I wouldn't want somebody who'd back down from that anyway. I can't imagine anybody that would be better qualified to take that job than Eric Bakich. And I'll be honest with you, I'd be surprised if, first of all, let's know this for a fact. Whoever Tim Corbin recommended is absolutely the front runner and odds on to get it, whoever it was. Wouldn't you agree with that?
Yeah, and the names that I heard, I believe I have shared this on the podcast before. What I was told a couple years ago, and this wasn't from Tim, but it came from somebody that was close to him, was that the choices would probably be Travis Jewett, who's now at Tulane, and has struggled some, or Josh Holliday, who's done great things at Oklahoma State. And of course, Josh's dad, Tom, was a coach at OSU before he was fired. I guess whatever wounds from that have healed for, obviously, Josh to take the job. I talked to a different person who is extremely well connected in the coaching community. This was just probably a month ago, and he mentioned he thought it would be Bakich. And that's before Michigan got on the roll and did anything in the NCAA tournament. I would have to think, and he thought his opinion on Holiday was that he'd probably just stay at OSU, which I can't really blame him. I think Eric's the guy, and I think now that Eric has been there and got to Omaha and come so close, I think that he would have to be the first choice.
Had to be, no doubt about it. That's my answer.
Okay, let's go to football. VU Matt 23 wants to know your favorite commit in the 2020 class.
Favorite commit in the 2020 class? Well, I happen to like this class a whole lot. A whole lot. Boy. I know what the easy answer is, but I think it's probably the right answer. Initially, I got to go with Ken Seals for a couple of reasons. One, this dude is a machine. I don't know if you've been paying attention to this guy, but this guy eats, breathes, sleeps football. He does. That's all he does is train to get better and better. He plays a very good team. Well, he's made them good. They weren't always the case, but the Kangaroos made the playoffs for the first time in a long time. He's the reason. But with Jamil Muhammad leaving, there's a look. Who knows what he would have ended up being? But from the young guys in in our quarterback stable, the Alan Walters of the world. Riley Neal's going to be here 1 year. Deuce has got another year or two. I need to see some of these young guns. He looks like a guy physically. He's already there. He wowed our guys in Nashville at camp on the Friday Night Lights deal. And I think having a really good quarterback who, by the way, I read an article about him the other day, and it was talking about he committed early because he wanted to help put this class together. And I think he's doing a very good job of that. I got to go with him just because we have to keep a great quarterback. But I'm going to tell you right now, and there's a couple players in this class that I really like. But I really, really like Logan Kyle, the kid out of Tomball, the wide receiver out of Tomball. Man, I like everything about him. He's a crisp route runner. He's got good hands, pretty good speed, plays in a tough conference or region in high school football there in the upper Houston area. Man, that dude right there to me is severely underrated. And I am extremely happy to have him in black and gold. And I'll tell you one thing, I will not be surprised if Seals to Kyle is a connection that is very successful in the near future. So but because of the importance of the position and some of the question marks with Muhammad leaving, I'm going to go with Ken Seals, my favorite from this class.
Okay, two more, then I'll get you out of here. Matt wants to know the incoming freshmen on each side of the ball that will have the biggest early impact this season.
Incoming freshmen that could have the earliest impact. I'm going to start on the defensive side of the ball, Chris. Let's go with, and these are all just the freshmen, right? Not grad transfers or anything like that.
He said freshmen, so yes.
Okay. On the defensive side of the ball, a guy that I like a lot, even more than his brother, from a physical standpoint, I think Anthony Orji may have a big impact. We'll see. Physically, he's certainly there. He's the kind of guy, he's got the frame. He could be a safety or transition into a linebacker. I'm not 100% sure how they plan on using him. I think it's at safety. But golly, Bill, you watch this dude. He's a headhunter. And he had good instincts. Again, another tough Texas program in Rockwall. I'm going to go with Anthony Orji on the defensive side of the ball. On the offensive side of the ball, man, I don't know that any of the offensive linemen come right in, from a physical standpoint and are ready to contribute. Certainly not a quarterback. The running game is going to be interesting because, I just don't know how many carries there's going to be with 5 out there. So I guess, and, it's funny because this is weird. We're talking about depth. And I think there's a lot of logical options out there at the wide receiver position too. But I think maybe one of the freshman receivers, especially in the slot, have a chance. Maybe Harrison or Body Jr. have a chance to do something early. I really, really like Devin Body Jr. a lot. Now, I haven't seen Harrison play in person, but I have seen Body Jr. play in person. And, wow, what an athlete. What an athlete. Maybe he gets, he gets into that rotation in the slot. Other than that, I don't know that this offense this year, which sounds crazy, but Chris, I think it's true. This offense, it's in the skill positions, they've got plenty of people who've already done it. So it's going to be harder than normal for somebody to break in. Usually we got guys in there that are doing it out of necessity. I don't know how ready Chris Pierce was to play as a freshman, but he did anyway. Chris Pierce coming in as a freshman this year probably wouldn't get in the rotation. Maybe he does, maybe he doesn't. But I'm going to go with receiver just because I don't think a lineman's ready, and the others, I don't know where the reps would come from. What do you think?
Well, I'm with you. I think Body is the first guy that probably came to mind, but they've got they got 6, 7 guys. And Pierce, who I had basically counted out, had a really good spring from everything I have heard. We didn't get to see much of it, but that's a kid that I think was on the brink of irrelevance and played himself back into contention. And then they get Justice Shelton Mosley. Tennyson, I think, did some things to stay in the fringe of the mix. I just don't know where the playing time comes from. I was a little surprised you didn't say Davion Davis.
Yeah, I mean, especially with him coming in spring, that's probably right. That's probably right. I guess when it comes to defensive line, especially interior ones, I'm not really expecting him to come in and make an immediate impact, but I forgot he was there in spring and looked pretty darn good doing that. So, yeah, you know what? That might be right. Can I do a 1B, a 1A for Davion Davis, and 1B for Anthony Hardaway? Good grief, Anthony Orji.
Oh, sure.
Cool, done.
I think you just did.
I'm a big Anthony Orji fan. I think he's going to be really good.
Ann Arbor Door, if we can't stop the run in football, how bad will it be in terms of wins and losses?
Bad. I don't know how to put it any other way. Bad. We've seen the results of what happens when you can't stop the run and people just gash us. I mean, never more. We always think about the Alabama game. Yes, that was disgusting. That's not what did it for me. It was the Florida game. It absolutely cost Vanderbilt the opportunity to win that game when Florida on 3rd and 4th down and long were running right up the middle and picking up ridiculous yards. I remember one play where Jordan Scarlett, it was like, I don't know, Chris, I think it was like 4th and 7. They ran the ball in the A-gap and got like 9 yards and kept the drive going. And it was a very winnable game for Vanderbilt. And, so, yeah, I mean, if they don't have an answer for that, then we're not really talking about anything. It's going to be the same old. But, I mean, I don't think that's going to be the case, man. I mean, we're starting to, you mentioned Davion Davis, the cat that's transferring in from Marist, Eddie, it's got 2 names. You know what I'm talking
Eddie's
about.
in Turner.
Yeah, that's it. With Dio, and guys, and of course, we got more depth along that defensive line too. We've got a couple defensive linemen that and Birchmeyer and Tidd who've been they got plenty of experience. I mean, we don't generally have that. So I mean, I don't think it would be as easy to crack that rotation, but Davis is a unique talent, and I have a feeling they're going to count on him a lot to plug up that A gap.
All right, let me get you out of here. I'll give you the floor for your parting thoughts and to tell people where to find your programs, where to follow you on Twitter, and anything else you'd like to mention, sir.
Well, I'll put it to you like this. I got to get in here to a doctor's appointment for this crazy shoulder of mine, so I have no other parting words other than to tell you that you can find me online at Twitter at Cheap Seats Bass and at News Talk 101.5 in Jackson, Tennessee from 6 to 8 p.m. Monday through Friday.
Okay, he's Seabass. I'm Chris Lee. Thank you for listening to the Vandy Sports Podcast. We probably are done with these for the week because of the holiday schedule, but I can assure you we will be back with more next week. Thank you for listening. Have a happy and safe 4th of July.